Chinese coming to our shores are criminals and gangsters, bringing with them a savagery not seen since the Indian Wars.
What Indian Wars, man? America's been at war 93% of the time. At 222 out of 239 years. Indian Wars, they're talking about starting in 1776. We're talking back to the Chickamauga Cherokee. A savagery not seen since the Indian Wars. For the first 20 years, it's all on the Chickamauga. The ones that signed no deals and made no treaties. Savages, they call them. All this barbarity, all the berber, Hebrew word for swan. We're talking Swan Knights, Tecumseh. Yeah, that was the last stand of the Igbo root. Yeah, we talked about the More War. When they talk Indian War, they still talking the More. Indian War, Indian War, Indian War, Indian War. So they're still talking the same Chickamauga Cherokee, Manak. And all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And all kinfolk ain't confolk. Indian War, Indian War. And since you know that you are the copper-colored races found here by the European, when we keep talking Texas Indian Wars way in the 1800s, my noggin, this is still you fighting. This is still you tribing up. You weren't no homeboy slave brought from Africa. You right here already fighting for the land that you own by birthright. And this country just went from one indigenous spot to another, right? Mexico, Peru, all throughout the Philippines. All these are Nagas, man. All these are Naga wars up into the 1900s. Finally, they go to World War II. And all this is still around the Naga. Oh, I'm just talking Nagasaki. Oh, boy. Indian War, Indian War, Indian War, Indian War, Indian Wars. Texas Indian Wars, Cherokee Indian Wars, Seminole, Cherokee Indian Wars. All popping back off with the Chickamauga for the first 20 years. Indian Wars, they say. Chinese. What's the Chinese got to do with the Indians? I don't know. I mean, unless you just talking, what's that Chinese? What's that China map? What's the China map that we got? What's the Indian-China war? What's the China got to do with the Indian? I'm talking Florida. I'm talking Mexico, Peru. Oh, Terra Fuego. How was Antarctica hot? I don't know. Terra Fuego. Let's go. Oh, we got China. Let's get it bigger. Let's get it bigger. China in 1548. Ptolemaeus map. Cateo is Cathay. Cathay is Marco Polo's China. Mangu. Oh, India Superior. Tangu. Florida. Mexico. China. Say it with me. Florida. Mexico. China. What's the Chinese got to do with the Indians? India Superior or North America? India Superior, or are you in North America, aka the original China? The original India. Yeah, these copper-colored Negroes you found in America, they're the actual Chinese. They're the Khan. The CH is not a ch, it's a k. And it's the Kenna or Kana, like Canada, like Mexican or Mexican, American, Kana, China, the Indian. India Superior. China. Oh boy, it's getting better.
And there is certainly no shortage of American men looking for work. We keep hiring foreign labor, we will decimate the working class. I probably feel the same way if I inherited my wealth. Your father financed your company. An insignificant loan, paid back in full. Gentlemen, please. As a fellow businessman, I'm sensitive to your concerns, Mr. Merriweather. And once we have voted in the Exclusion Act, we can certainly legislate for ample Chinese labor as economics dictate.
Tell me, Senator, you compare the Chinese to the Indians, and I can't help but wonder how the Indians viewed the arrival of our own ancestors, turning up on their shores in droves.
We brought with us God and civility.
You mean because we murdered them by the thousands with bullets instead of tomahawks and spears?
Oh,
I imagine they would have wanted to enact an Exclusion Act all their own where we were concerned.
Oh, Penelope, dear, I hardly think it's fair to compare.
My point is, we came to a country, found a people we deemed inferior, and stole their land right out from under them. And since then, we have imported different races we deem inferior to do our dirty work for us. And when that work is done, we lament their presence in our country as an assault on our values.
bang.
All right, Chinese dream on Native American land and the table of cannabis boom and bust. The pandemic, 100 Chinese migrants who lost their jobs moved to remote cities on Navajo Nation Indian reservations in New Mexico to do what they thought was legal agricultural work. Instead, their local Native community found themselves pitted against one another in a bizarre cautionary tale about the boom in cannabis production in the U.S. and the impact of Asian migrant laborers. When Zia, not her real name, first heard about the jobs of the flower cutters, she pictured roses. Details were scant by her roommate told her it was 10 days' work for about $200 a day, room and board included, unemployed in the pandemic and unable to send money back to her adult children in southern China. Zia had been living at one of the crowded boarding houses common in a large age of migrant class in enclave in LA, San Gabriel Valley, and the journey sounded like a fine temporary solution. In early October, Zia and 5 other women made an 11-hour drive to the outskirts of Farmington, a small city nestled in stunning but sparsely populated high desert in northern Mexico. When she arrived and the new boss checked them into a bright pink roadside motel and called the Traveling Inn. It's a series of rooms on the first floor. Zia and her co-workers sat in a chair around a heap of plants and material who delivered by the rental van and the night trimming the flowers off the top. These were definitely not roses, and the family plants remember Zia and Akaya, silverwood, wormwood, when Chinese burn to ward off mosquitoes. They got that from South America. Okay, the flies smelled so strong that the odor hung around the motel like a cloud. But in a moment, Zia was content. A convenient middle-aged mother of two, she had worked many jobs since arriving in the U.S. in 2015. Her carrier, nanny, masseuse, and a lot of other less lonely. So she just been hoeing and beating dicks. I was happy I could talk to other people at work, she recalls in Mandarin. I much prefer cutting flowers. Just 3 days into the work, there was a knock on the door. Zia assumed it was someone calling them to dinner until she saw them in the uniform badges. Initially, it was impossible to communicate it to the officers who spoke Mandarin around. He asked the workers if they knew what kind of flowers they were cutting. One by one, they shook their heads. I wasn't afraid. I thought I didn't commit any crimes. Bullshit. With no translator to help communicate with law enforcement, her and the court appointed lawyer Zia says that for days she did little more than sit on the bunk and cry. She assumed the worst of whatever she had done would land her in prison or doing hard labor, and she would never make it back home. I thought my life was over, and I thought of my son and they wouldn't even know if I died in America. All look like Native Americans to me. I don't know about the Native Americans, but they look like the Native Americans to me. Meanwhile, the mugshots of the co-workers were all over the local news. They had been charged with multiple felonies for trafficking, conspiracy, intent to distribute a controlled substance and high-grade marijuana. Zia did not know what was over the summer. 30 minutes on the highway from the bright pink hotel, massive marijuana farming operation had sprung up in the tiny town of Shiprock on the Navajo Nation reservation. Hundreds of Asian migrant workers like herself have flocked there from all over the U.S. to live and work on the farms, having lost their jobs due to the pandemic. Sound like this been going on a long time. It's a part of recent expansion of Chinese American investments into the U.S. cannabis industry. Investors sought to recoup losses from shuttered restaurants, spas, and tourism and business, and plowing millions into the cannabis, all despite the fact that marijuana remains a social taboo in Chinese immigrant communities. While hardly on a minority community interested in cannabis, the rural parts of the U.S. and the Asian workforce stood. It set the stage of the bitter fight of the local Navajo Nation, where unscrupulous and entrepreneurs who took advantage of the complex, confusing laws and governing the industry and set the farms on a course of disaster. Everybody at one time was for the hemp because they lost their jobs, and the pandemic recalled the Navajo Nation residents. And then all of a sudden things changed. I think it turned everybody against one another. Yeah, we was all doing good business. We was all keeping it, Asian persuasion. And then all of a sudden, it became a mafia thing. Babe Redfeather looks at the distance at the top of the hill near her home in Shiprock, New Mexico. All change another June, Redfeather saw an enormous lorry jostling down the narrow frontage road and separated her property from her neighbors. A group of men got out and started unloading equipment into the empty field. It astonished Redfeather that on a reservation where new development is tightly controlled by the tribal bureaucracy, a large-scale farming operation was going up across the street without her even hearing about it. The Navajo Nation was also struggling with severe coronavirus outbreak, one of the worst in the country. The movement on the off the reservation was supported to tightly controlled. She likes to record what was going on her phone. They're like, "What are you doing here?" She recalls. These are non-natives, so of course I could fire back saying, "What are you doing here? You guys aren't allowed here." But you couldn't tell them that because you didn't know who they were. You thought they was Native Americans, huh?